Cool. Hello, my name's Kevin Green. I'm one of the ETNZ executive members. Welcome to the advantages and disadvantages of painted backdrops versus LED backdrops. A few housekeeping rules, and that's basically if you have any questions for our panelists today, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, not the general chat. Today in our panelist board, we have Dave Spark and Grant. We are waiting for John Verryt, and hopefully he will come through to us shortly. To get started and while we wait for your questions, Dave and Grant, can you introduce yourselves? Maybe starting with Dave. Oh, hello, John. I'm just saying, can you guys introduce yourselves? And let's start with Dave. And what your background is with LED or painted backgrounds.
Yep. Hey everybody. So my background, I've been in the industry since I left high school, probably 20 odd years ago now, I guess. And I started off as a lighting technician and grew up through that sort of stuff with a keen interest in the video side of things as a bit of a hobby at that point, but gradually moved on to, you know, as technology kind of started wheedling its way into, you know, a lot of theatre and that sort of thing. I gradually moved over to video and LED and media servers and all that sort of side of things. Currently, I run a LED company with a bunch of various resolution sort of products, indoor, outdoor. We're based in Christchurch and we do shows all over the country. I do a lot of musical theatre shows and supply to a lot of the New Zealand consortium kind of group together, and you know, pro-am sort of level stuff, a bit of professional stuff as well with that, and also a lot of corporate and concert and all that sort of things. So that's me.
Cool, thank you. How about you, Grant?
Hi everyone. I've been involved in theatre for quite some time, mainly as a hobby to start with, and the community theatre side of things. Over the last 12 to 15 years now ago, we started Meese Productions, and I was freelancing, directing around New Zealand, mainly North Island, and we were doing our own larger musical productions in the Civic or Bruce Mason or somewhere in Auckland, whichever was available at the time. So we've used a lot of the Pro-Am products around, etc. And also just started with Juicy Boys as our first professional production recently, which did Auckland, Wellington. We had a good time with that and some great LED use, I thought, in there. Yeah, so started as an actor and basically moved through quite a bit of the, you know, musical directing and then on to directing, and yeah, now it's not a hobby, it's a very, very full-time job.
How about you, John?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm a set designer. Have been since God was born. So all this LED stuff is quite new to me, but hey, I can stay with it. I'm all good. So that's all right. That's me.
Cool. Well, we've had no questions in yet, so I'll throw one in to you, Grant. Actually, you're saying you just did Jersey Boys. Why did you decide to go with LED rather than traditional painted backdrops and touring it around the country? Were there any advantages to LED over painted? You know?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning of our discussion with set designer and myself, we really, it's such a, Jersey Boys, for example, is such a fast-paced piece, 52 scenes in the 2.5 hours. And we wanted to be able to create, I guess, very, I guess, efficient changes into those scenes, while be able to find some grittiness and reality around it without having to fly things in, fly things out, and without it kind of interrupting the flow of the piece. I think, you know, Jersey Boys, for example, was always traditionally a very much a one set kind of solid structure with a few, you know, with a vast amount of props. And what we really wanted when we talked about it was something to enhance that, just to take you to the place, as opposed to actually, you know, spending a lot of time in one place. You had to be in a lot of different places. So I guess that is the advantage of it. You know, one of the things that, you know, the discussions was, I never wanted the LED, and Dave heard me say this a lot, because Dave worked on, you know, did the design for that, the LED for us, was I didn't want it to overpower the production. It always just had to complement. And that was just hugely important to how we integrated it into Jersey Boys, as an example.
That's successful.
Yeah, and I was very, very happy with it. We worked really hard. So Dave, you know, presented a whole lot of original stuff, and we either sort of pared it down a little bit, or we, you know, took, you know, hard lines off it, and because the set had a lot of hard lines anyway, and so and it also helped to kind of pull focus, I suppose, to where the acting was happening, not having to use the whole space, whereas sometimes LED has been used as a full backdrop. We had 4 different panels operating throughout it, so we could use all of those together. Part of them we just use one panel and hone it down to one area, and we found it, you know, it was the first time I had used it particularly in a show, and I had so many people mention the integration of set, LED and lighting all together. So it worked really well for us for that product. Absolutely.
What size panels were you using,
Dave?
So resolution wise, they were 3.9 mil. So that's the pixel pitch, the distance between the LEDs. They were 500 mil panels. We had, what did we have? They were about 6 by, I think 3.5 was one of the panels. 6 by 2.5 was another one that flew in and out quite a bit to allow our set to come underneath, and then a couple of 6 meter high by 1 meter wide kind of legs downstage a bit further of that. So a little bit of depth stuff, a little bit of ability to go, you know, behind it and move in and out of it. It wasn't just a flat wall like Grant was sort of saying other stuff's potentially used.
Rather than just a flat surface, you guys had multiple surfaces to create better texture to
Yeah,
it.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
We definitely didn't want flat from the very beginning, and I guess that was one of my things. And for me personally, I'm probably a bit of a traditionalist, and I like my, you know, painted sets and things like that as well, and painted backdrops. But you know, for example, I'll use an example with Mamma Mia that we did around the country, where we decided to put a gauze in front of the LED just again so it didn't overtake the production. It provided some really good visuals. I don't know that we always did that with every version of it around the country, but again, that was a full screen, and that worked. That was more about drama, as opposed, and you know, a bit more theatricality, I suppose, as opposed to realism, which we went for with Jersey Boys.
If I could jump in on that, so the thing with the Mamma Mia back in the day was that it was a 37.5 mil pitch, so a much bigger gap between pixels, and you're seeing those pixels pretty much no matter where you were in the theater, sort of thing. You knew it was an LED screen. It wasn't high res by any means, and so we actually used it was a Rear Pro Psych, not a gauze, because gauzes don't tend to work very well with LED. Because LED is a grid of dots, the gauze, the shark's tooth, is a grid of fabric essentially. The two create that sort of, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, it's a moire pattern essentially, or moire, some people call it moire, but the two kind of interfere and kind of create a shimmer, which is quite nasty to the eye if you have a gauze. But the Rear Pro screen Grant was talking about, which was rigged basically a line set on the fly line downstage, just diffused all the LEDs out, and so you ended up with essentially a psych that you had a low, you know, a screen, you know, level, a kind of a low quality image that you could do. We, you know, just painted skies and all that sort of thing. And like Grant said, it was just so much softer and more, smooth than what you would have without that technology. One of the issues with the lower res stuff like that as well is that when people walk in front of it without a rear pro screen there, they actually almost take a little bit of the pixelation with them. You'll actually notice dots around the extremities of persons or set pieces and stuff. And that's, again, by reducing that pixel density down, you lose all that sort of thing. You're not seeing that from the, even the front row of the audience sort of thing. You get a nice high detail quality in there.
So one of the things I've got from that ground is that you still try to capture the texture of paint, where it's quite flat. So you try to use tricks to create what a traditional painted backcloth would be.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we learnt with, I think, with Jersey Boys. It's all very well to get images that you want to use, and Dave could probably talk a lot about this, but there wasn't, I don't think, a single image that we used in the production that didn't have texturing or blotting or something over it to make it more both structural and textural and whatever it needed to be. There was multiple layers on each image, and that would be the only way I think you could really use it on stage, unless you just needed something that blasted out, a statement, because a single image I just don't think would cut it in today's imagery. People would not buy into that. So you really do need to you treat it like a backdrop or a painted backdrop. Or even if you're going realism, you're still going to have layering on it, for realism.
Where did you get your imagery from?
Dave?
So we made a lot of it. We either sourced sort of various textures and bits and pieces. There's a stack of websites, matte painting, CG texture. I can, if anyone wants to know, they can come to send me an email or something.
Is there a place for creating hand-drawn paintings and then digitalizing those and use them? So kind of combining both the traditional with the LED technology. Is that a way forward for us, do you reckon?
Definitely could be. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the thing with creating images from from photographs or that sort of thing is you start with that pretty decent high quality realism sort of thing by using skies and all that sort of stuff. But what it means as well is if you mix and match those together, you've got that ability on site to dial in those specific elements. So if you've got a nice shot looking down a street or something, and you've got a sky in the background, when you're sitting there and you go, actually, you know what, this scene, this transitions into nighttime, so we can utilize that same street thing, but change the sky to nighttime, and then adjust the colors and the light angle and all that sort of stuff over the period of the scene or that sort of thing. With a painted image, once you've got it blown up there, obviously you can redo it, that sort of thing, but it doesn't give you the ability to kind of go, you know what, I'm finding that the buildings are taking over the scale, the perspective to the people on stage doesn't look quite as good, as we'd hoped. Can we stretch those buildings up a little bit? Or you've got a lot of flexibility on site to be able to make adjustments and really dial it in, that you potentially don't have.
So
one of the biggest assets to having a screen is you can change the image, whereas a painted cloth is a painted cloth, and it will always be the same thing. So you just get a variety of images.
Does it change the whole design process then in the production? Like you said, John, if we've painted a site, we can't change it instantaneously or send it away to come back within an hour. So how did you find the design process has changed from going from painted?
I've just done a production with Indian ink, which is paintings that I made that we then scanned and photographed and then projected. That could have gone into an LED screen, but I find cost-wise, which we will go into in a minute, that was I find projection a lot softer and friendlier to work with, not to mention about a tenth of the price.
I saw that production when you were workshopping it in Auckland, and when it was in Auckland, you still had animation wheels in front of the projector. Did you?
Yeah, it changed from that. Originally, I made images using layers of colored gel, lighting gel, with a shadow structure behind it. And I just layered all this stuff and then popped it in front of a projector as a light source. And that was quite satisfying. It looked like kind of a glass slide or something from 1900 or something, which was quite satisfying for the piece. But it proved unpractical, and we weren't getting an intense enough light through the projector to give us a good image. So I changed it and did actual paintings, and then photographed the paintings and projected those as digital images. And that worked really well. So that's where that stands now.
Pretty cool how you went through that journey of going from that traditional craft to creating it and moving it for practicality. I think is really
I did resist for a while, but it was futile.
We have got a question, guys, come in from Fraser, and he's saying, when working with multiple screens to create the depth on stage, how easy is it to control the content so it doesn't look horrible from an off axis? So I suppose he's meaning if you're in a wide auditorium, what's the viewing angles like on it?
Yeah, so there was like what Grant was talking about is a lot of what you're adding to that is shading, and I guess almost a light kind of, you're trying to simulate what light would do on a set object if it was in a physical aspect there. So for example, Jersey Boys, we had the tall 1 meter wide, 6 meter high ones, but we had the other ones were directly behind, sort of spelling off. So from your widest sort of seat in the auditorium, you could see just to the end of that lid, but from center you weren't. So we'd have a big amount of fade off on the edges towards black, so that you weren't seeing, if you were sitting in center, you weren't seeing a real hard edged cut between the leg and the panel behind. You were seeing it sort of a blend out, and if you were sitting off to the to the side axes, you were seeing a nice fade to black, not a hard cut when you turned into a leg at that point. So a lot of it is trying to just balance that so it looks the same as you would if you were lighting. You're tending to soften off towards the edges of the stage so that your focal point is more central or left or right, depending on where the scene's blocked.
On that theme, Dave, that's a for your lighting designer head on. How different is it? Obviously with a traditional backcloth, we light it, we put texture on it, we play with color and see how that works. But you've got a giant LED screen sitting at the back, splaying light everywhere over your sets, creating extra shadow. What are the advantages over LED when it comes to that? Is that a problem, or is there ways around fixing it?
It was for me, just very quickly as a director, that was one of my big fears when we had 4 great hulking LED screens, and I had to be talked around slightly around it. But actually, when the realism of it is, we never had them at a huge brightness anyway, because we were just. It was never meant to dominate at any point from my point of view. So what we got was very little spill. I think we probably had 1 or 2 lighting issues as we went through the in process for the theatre, and one of the images we ended up changing because it just wasn't working with the lighting. But there was only 1 out of 50 images or something like that. So it worked pretty well. I was talking to Dave earlier today, and one of the big things though that people can forget is the great hulking. If you're using follow spots, if the follow spots hit them, that's a really tough thing. So you definitely have to work around that. Whereas I don't think you probably have to work as hard around a painted backdrop scenario with that.
Yeah, and that's where sometimes a bit more separation works better. If it is more of a backdrop and it's further back removed from people, that's not always an option, obviously. And yeah, from a lighting point of view, the two. I mean, Jersey Boys. A lot of the effects, or a lot of the show, even was using it as a psych or a lighting type effect, wasn't it, Grant? So
Yeah.
But yeah, from a lighting point of view, you definitely have to have good communication, and a lot of it's all about compositing. I kind of I look at it like, you know, the classic green screen kind of environment in film, where you cut a green screen, you know, you cut a person out, you film a person, you cut the green screen out, and you slap it on a background, and you don't kind of look at that and go and hope that the two are going to line up. You spend some time to try and balance those two out. So when you're seeing a cheap straight to DVD sort of movie versus a big Hollywood blockbuster, you can tell the difference in the quality, and that's around things with like lighting, angles, color, brightnesses, all that sort of stuff. So you're compositing essentially like a film, but in real time. So if you've got sunshine on your image coming from, you know, stage left to stage right, you want to try and replicate a similar kind of feel with your lighting on stage. Your color tones, you know, there's no point being in a completely different shift of color that puts you in two different places. So it's about really good communication between your lighting designer and your video designer and your director and your set designer, and just trying to get all that cohesiveness. And, you know, like Grant said, there was one particular graphic we did for that one where they were up on a bridge, and I'd done this kind of steel work frame truss kind of bridge, and there was a sky in the background, and try as we might, we just couldn't get the right angle for the lighting to light the people fairly close to the screen and keep the light off the screen. And the effect just got ruined straight away, because you were shadowing, their shadows were showing up and the light was showing up on the sky, and that's not going to happen in in real life. So we changed the backdrop, you know, and the LG just turned and said, look, I'm sorry, but I've tried, you know, can we do something else? And so we took the sky out, and we put another steelwork thing in, and we added some water rippling kind of effect over it to give it that sensation of being next to water or on a bridge. And that worked, you know, well. And that's the thing, it's all about compromise, isn't it, Grant?
How did you go comparing costs of doing all that LED and getting all that gear in and out of every venue, compared with doing a straight set with maybe projection or just a set with a painted set? How did that relate cost-wise?
I don't, Grant, if you did a cross comparison over set wise, but I mean, like Grant was saying earlier, you know, there was 52 scenes, like to build cloths and backdrops and stuff for all of those scenes. It just, you wouldn't have fitted it in the venue. Let alone,
boys that I've seen generally just wheel on a bit of furniture or something to.
Yeah, I think probably what we would have ended up with. I mean, yeah, look, LED is probably a more expensive option than projection, I think, overall. But we would have ended up probably, I would say, with a lot more flying items and hard pieces of.
Are we reducing jobs in our industry? I mean, you know, by going to digital, are we losing people using the fly rail? I think at the Opera House in Wellington, at the back of there's the old scenic painting room, which hasn't been used in years. Like, are we creating new jobs doing LED? Are we losing a skill set? And like, where are we going to be
creating new skill sets? I don't think we're losing anything. They still need to be rigged. It's tough for scenic artists these days, I can tell you that.
Yeah, there's definitely a change in the industry for that, but and I do think, you know, back to John's question about, you know, getting from one place to another and transfer for us, we found was very easy. Yes, it might take 3 people to get your LED in and out, but again, you're up and running before you know it. No slower, I guess, once you've done your initial season than you would be with painted backdrops or additional flying items.
Everything in the track with you.
Yeah, We literally we had 4 days when we did our transfer, but we could have done it in 3 days, and that was going to a much smaller venue, which is why it took us time. But if we weren't going down in size, we probably could have transferred in 2 days.
Yeah, that's good.
The big sorry, can I just jump in on the projection LED sort of thing? Is the big difference in that, as I'm sure a lot of people know, and Grant, you know, you had this dealing last year as well with a heavy projected show. So the big issues with projection are either you need to do rear projection, so you need the space behind your cycle, whatever, to have, you know, so you need to run it at half depth or something if you're doing a large area, or you're doing front projection where you've got to find a compromise between projecting through people, not shadowing, or other set elements. So when you're got a flowing piece in front, you either have to project around that doesn't work from viewing off axes and stuff, or you know, you got to live with the shadowing and just cut it out. So there's, and then obviously the lighting sort of thing, LEDs can compete with the lighting. It's with a projection, you have to be very cautious about either your angles of lighting, or you know, your level, your brightnesses of lighting, so that you're not washing out what's being projected onto. Often, if you're using a lighter surface for projection, that doesn't go away when you black out, or down to a follow spot or a small scene, you know, downstage. You've still got this grey glow or you know, object that's, you know, you're aware of in the background. LEDs a lot darker in that sense generally. So
one of the bigger problems with LED flat screens is they're a but ugly thing to have on stage, and if there's some way they can be made a bit more softer looking just as a surface. You can't have LED on all the time because it just overwhelms everything. Great for rock and roll or outdoor events, or you need a lot of cut through. But for a theatre drama or a dance piece where it's predominantly dark, these LED screens are far too brutal.
So James, that goes again about using the rear projection surface to soften that.
Yeah, well, I'm using projection and front projection. I actually don't mind projecting onto people, or one of my favorite thing with projection is to project onto cloth that's moving. And I've just done that with Atamira dance, and I had silk all through the space, and we were just projecting on the silk, and the silk was moving constantly. And I actually felt that the projections, although they went in and out of focus a little bit, became more alive.
Yeah. And that works.
I think
really
without
well
doubt,
different shows and different ballet dance versus when you're trying to do a realistic backdrop or that sort of thing. Grant?
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I think there's no doubt that there's places for all these techniques, and it's just choosing the right products. I mean, I have seen LED used in some shows that I just think is absolutely awful. And it's just there because they are using it as a quick change facility, for want of a better word, but it has done detriment to the production. Or they've used it as bold and bright, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and there's been recently the new one in Australia that they had going, and I thought it was absolutely used brilliantly there because it could be loud, proud, never got in the way of anything. And really added to what could have been a very clunky production set-wise, as it had been in London. So there is places for it, but at the same time, a dance show or a musical that you could project and have lots of fabric moving, you might use a combination through. But yeah, I'm with you. It is a very hard surface, but I think you just use it for the. I think there's still a lot of ways to use LED without it just being a hard surface.
Mostly in theatre shows at the moment, designers are putting LED screens into frames, so they become kind of like a window or something, and that's Northwest.
Guys, I'm
And the
afraid
same-
I'm going to have to finish our session as we are running a few minutes late now.
Yep.
I think what Grant just said is a really good summary. That, you know, it's using LED at the right place and using scenic painting at the right place, and you know, we don't know what the future's going to hold, and that combination of using the right product at the right time is important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a game changer
Yeah.
for rock and roll.
Yeah. Does anybody want to say one final thing before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in quickly. One thing I do want to say around LED, I didn't kind of get a chance to say, was the difference. There's a lot of difference in LED. So you have outdoor products, which are much brighter, you know, aimed at that kind of competing with the sunlight kind of thing. And then you have indoor products that are pretty dim and designed for lower level stuff. So making sure that if you are speccing it for a job or something like that, that you're actually going for a product that works for that environment. And theatre and stuff is just so dark, so you're amazed at how low you're running even indoor products in that environment. So yeah, making sure you're talking about the right kind of thing and checking what you're being provided or what you're looking at buying or whatever is the right product for that environment, essentially.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. It's great talking to you. We are going to wrap up now. The next session is the wrap up for the whole conference. So if you move over to the lobby, you'll be able to hear final comments from Vicky. I just want to say thank you to you guys again, everyone, for listening today. I want to thank you to MSS and Verryt for assisting us with taking the whole conference online, as well as Sam, Molly, Creative Ambient, Spencer, Mike, Q Theatre, Burnside High for creating viewing centres and the studios. And of course, please visit everybody who you couldn't go see at the Trade Expo, which were Aspiring Safety, Fiasco, Jams, John Herbert, Kenderdine, Entertainment Lighting, LS Group, MDR Sound and Lighting, Metro Productions, Scenic Solutions, Showquip, Show Technology, Stage Mark, Theatre Light, and ULA Group. So thank you, everybody, and see you in the lobby. Thank you.
Kevin.
Thank you. Bye.